When my ex-husband's lawyer screamed that my children lived like animals, I thought I'd lost everything. But I never expected my 8-year-old daughter to stand up in that courtroom with the one piece of evidence that would destroy him. My name is Darcy Winters, and 6 months ago, I was just another divorced mother trying to rebuild her life. At 34, I'd spent 12 years married to Preston Winters, the kind of man everyone in our suburban Connecticut community thought was perfect. Real estate developer, charity board member, youth baseball coach, the man who opened doors for elderly ladies and remembered everyone's name at the country club. Nobody knew that same man had systematically destroyed my self-worth behind our mansion's French doors. Our daughter Ivy was 8 years old, quiet like a church mouse but with eyes that missed nothing. She had my dark hair but Preston's sharp intelligence, though she wielded it with a gentleness he never possessed. She loved purple, kept journals full of pressed flowers, and had recently started carrying around a small backpack she never let out of her sight. I thought it was a security thing from the divorce. I had no idea she was gathering evidence that would save us. Finn, our 6-year-old son, was Ivy's opposite in every way. Where she was stillness, he was motion. Where she observed, he acted. He'd inherited my stubbornness and Preston's competitive streak, but somehow had emerged with a fierce protectiveness for his sister that made my heart ache. The day Preston moved out, Finn had stood in front of Ivy's bedroom door and announced he was her bodyguard now. We'd laughed then. We didn't know how much we'd need protecting. That morning in October, the courtroom felt like a coliseum where I was about to be fed to lions. Preston sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread about successful fathers fighting for their children. His $3,000 suit was perfectly pressed, his wedding ring conspicuously absent, replaced by a Rolex that cost more than I'd spend on groceries in 5 years. His lawyer, Garrett Vaughn, was the kind of attorney other lawyers had nightmares about, silver-haired, distinguished, and utterly ruthless. He didn't just win custody cases, he annihilated the opposition. My lawyer, Miss Hendricks, was brilliant but overwhelmed. Preston had hired a team. I had one woman working for reduced fees because she believed in my case. She kept straightening her papers nervously, a tell that Preston's side had definitely noticed. Judge Morrison presided from her bench like an unmovable mountain, her expression already skeptical as she reviewed the case files. She was known for being fair but harsh on parents who couldn't provide stable environments for their children. Preston's team had done their homework selecting this court. The gallery was sparse but significant. My mother sat in the back row with the children, her arm protectively around Ivy while Finn swung his legs, unable to sit still. Preston's parents were there too, wearing matching disapproving expressions they'd perfected over years of looking at me like I was never quite good enough for their golden son. A court reporter typed steadily in the corner, documenting what was about to become the worst day of my life, until it became the best. Preston's assistant sat behind him, feeding him notes and water like he was preparing for a marathon. He was, in a way, a marathon to destroy me, to take my children, to prove to everyone that leaving him had been my greatest mistake. He'd promised me that much the day I served him divorce papers. "You'll regret this, Darcy," he'd said, his voice calm as still water. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are." The build-up to this moment had been 6 months of documented harassment disguised as concern. Surprise wellness checks he'd called on us, photos taken at angles that made our cozy apartment look like a hovel, recorded conversations with the children that he'd manipulated and edited. He'd built a case that I was an unfit mother, too poor, too emotional, too broken to raise our children properly. What he didn't know was that while he was building his case of lies, someone else was building a case of truth. In her purple backpack, Ivy carried 3 months of recordings, saved photos, preserved text messages, and documented threats. An 8-year-old girl had become a one-child surveillance team, protecting her family the only way she knew how, by making sure the truth couldn't be deleted, hidden, or twisted. The courtroom was about to become a battlefield where truth would go to war with carefully crafted deception, and the general leading truth's army stood 4 feet tall and wore light-up sneakers. I never imagined I'd be sitting in a custody hearing, watching my entire life as a mother get torn apart word by word. 6 months earlier, Preston and I had finally divorced after 12 years of what looked like a perfect marriage from the outside. The split had been anything but amicable, despite what Preston told our mutual friends at the country club. He painted himself as the heartbroken husband who'd tried everything to save our marriage, while I was the unstable wife who'd thrown away a perfect life. The truth was much darker. Preston had controlled every aspect of our existence with surgical precision. Grocery receipts had to be photographed and filed. Playdates required written requests submitted 3 days in advance. He monitored my phone, tracked my car, and questioned every friend I made. When I bought Ivy a book without permission, he donated her entire bookshelf to charity as punishment for my financial irresponsibility. When I enrolled Finn in soccer without consulting him first, he canceled the registration and told the coach I was having mental health issues. The day I finally found the courage to leave came after Ivy's 8th birthday party. Preston had humiliated me in front of 30 guests because I'd ordered chocolate cake instead of vanilla. Such a small thing, but he'd spent 20 minutes explaining to everyone how I couldn't handle simple decisions, how I needed help, how concerned he was about my declining mental state. I watched our friends' faces change from amusement to pity to concern. That night, Ivy had crawled into my bed and whispered, "Mom, why does Daddy make you cry?" That question changed everything. My children were watching. They were learning that love looked like control, that marriage meant fear, that mothers were meant to be small and quiet and sorry. I filed for divorce the next week. Our new apartment was a far cry from the 7-bedroom colonial we'd left behind. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen with outdated appliances, and a living room that doubled as Finn's soccer practice space. But those 900 square feet held more joy than our mansion ever had. Ivy covered every wall with her artwork, watercolor butterflies and pencil sketches of our small family of 3. Finn built elaborate Lego cities on every surface, naming the buildings after us. "This is Mom's castle," he'd announce, "and it has a moat to keep bad guys out." My lawyer, Miss Hendricks, had warned me that morning about what to expect. She was a small woman with fierce eyes who'd taken my case at reduced rates because, as she put it, "I recognize a survivor when I see one." She'd spread the custody petition across her desk like battle plans. "Preston has hired Garrett Vaughn. He submitted evidence that you're financially unstable, emotionally fragile, and living in substandard conditions. He's asking for full custody with supervised visits for you." "But the kids are happy," I'd protested. "Their teachers say they're thriving." "Happy doesn't always win in court," she'd replied grimly. "Money and presentation do. And Preston has both." That morning before court, I'd made breakfast like any other day. Scrambled eggs for Finn, who insisted on drowning them in ketchup. Toast with jam for Ivy, cut diagonally because she said triangles tasted better than rectangles. We ate at our small round table, the one I'd bought from a thrift store and painted white myself. Finn chattered about his upcoming soccer game. Ivy was quieter than usual, her purple backpack sitting on her lap even while she ate. "Mom, are we going to live with Dad again?" Finn had asked suddenly, ketchup on his chin. The question hit me like cold water. "We're going to see what the judge decides is best for everyone," I'd managed, keeping my voice steady. "But we want to stay with you," he'd said simply, as if that should be enough to decide everything. Ivy hadn't said anything, but she'd reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were sticky with jam, and I didn't care one bit. She'd been different lately. More watchful, more careful. She kept that purple backpack with her constantly, even taking it to the bathroom. I'd assumed it was anxiety from the divorce, maybe some comfort items she needed close by. Her teacher had mentioned she'd been writing in her journal more, which the school counselor said was a healthy way to process change. What I didn't know was that my 8-year-old daughter had been preparing for war. While Preston plotted our destruction, while his lawyers built their case, while I struggled just to keep our heads above water, Ivy had been gathering ammunition. Inside that purple backpack was the truth Preston thought he'd deleted, the evidence he thought he'd destroyed, and the proof that would reveal exactly who he really was. We were about to walk into that courtroom as David facing Goliath, except David was wearing light-up sneakers and carrying a backpack full of secrets. The courtroom was Preston's stage, and he knew it. He sat there in his perfectly tailored suit, hands folded on the table, wearing the expression of a concerned father who'd been pushed to his limits. His lawyer, Garrett Vaughn, stood and approached the judge's bench with the confidence of a man who'd already won. "Your Honor," Vaughn's voice filled the courtroom like thunder. "My client, Preston Winters, has been forced to watch his children's living conditions deteriorate drastically since their mother removed them from their family home. These children have gone from a 7-bedroom estate with educational resources, private tutoring, and enrichment activities to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where they share a single room like refugees. Judge Morrison looked up from her papers, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Continue, counselor." Vaughn pulled out a folder thick with photographs. "These images, Your Honor, document the shocking decline in the children's welfare." He held up the first photo, a pristine bedroom from our old house. This was Ivy's room in the family home. Custom bookshelves, educational materials, a computer for schoolwork, space to grow and learn. He slapped down another photo. "This is where she sleeps now. A mattress on the floor, clothes in plastic bins, sharing 10 square feet with her younger brother." My stomach twisted. He'd taken that photo during Preston's last visit, right after we'd moved, before I could afford proper beds. I'd bought beds the next week with my first paycheck, but of course that wasn't in his evidence. "The children's academic performance has suffered," Vaughn continued, pulling out report cards. "Ivy's grades have dropped from straight A's to B's and C's. Finn has been marked tardy 7 times since the separation. Their teachers report behavioral changes, emotional distress, and declining participation." What he didn't mention was that Ivy's grades dropped the week Preston served me with custody papers, that Finn's tardiness happened during Preston's visitation weeks, when he deliberately brought them to school late to make me look bad. Furthermore, Vaughn's voice rose dramatically, their mother has exposed them to financial instability and emotional turbulence. She works irregular hours as a freelance graphic designer, barely making ends meet. The children have reported going to food banks, wearing secondhand clothes, and hearing their mother cry about money at night. Preston leaned back slightly, and I caught the smallest smile on his face. He'd rehearsed this, planned every moment, every revelation designed to paint me as a failure. "Your Honor," Vaughn pulled out his final piece of evidence, "we have recordings from the children themselves during their father's visitation time." The courtroom speakers crackled to life with Finn's small voice. "Mom cries at night. She thinks we're sleeping, but I can hear her. She says we might lose the apartment." Then Ivy's voice carefully prompted, "Sometimes there's not much food. Mom says we have to wait until she gets paid." My hands clenched in my lap. "Yes," I'd cried, privately, quietly, when I thought they couldn't hear. Yes, money was tight between paychecks, but we always had food, always had what we needed. Preston had coached them, caught them at vulnerable moments, twisted their words into weapons. "Your Honor," Vaughn's voice turned grave, "these children are living in poverty, exposed to their mother's emotional instability, declining academically and socially. They're practically living like animals because of Miss Winters's inability to provide proper care. My client requests immediate transfer of custody with supervised visitation for the mother until she can demonstrate financial and emotional stability." Judge Morrison turned to look at me, and I saw it in her eyes. Disgust, disappointment, the same look I'd seen from Preston's family, from our country club friends, from everyone who believed his version of events. She saw a mother who'd selfishly torn her children from luxury to chase some feminist dream of independence. Miss Hendricks stood to respond, but her voice sounded thin after Vaughn's booming performance. "Your Honor, Miss Winters has provided a stable, loving environment. The children's current teachers report they're well-adjusted and happy. Their mother works hard to provide for them." "Working hard doesn't mean working successfully," Vaughn interrupted. "These children deserve better than their mother's good intentions." Preston shifted in his seat, straightening his tie. He'd won, and he knew it. Every piece of evidence, every photograph, every recording had been carefully orchestrated to create this moment. He turned our children into weapons and aimed them straight at my heart. Judge Morrison began making notes, her pen scratching against paper like a countdown to my worst nightmare. She looked up, ready to speak, and I knew with horrible certainty what she was about to say. I was going to lose my children. Preston had orchestrated the perfect demolition of my character, my capabilities, my worth as a mother. That's when I saw Ivy stand up in the back row. My lawyer, Miss Hendricks, tried desperately to salvage our sinking case. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit teacher testimonials that directly contradict Mr. Vaughn's claims. Both children are described as happy, creative, and well-adjusted. Their art teacher specifically notes that Ivy has been flourishing since the separation, showing increased confidence and creativity. But Judge Morrison barely glanced at the documents. The damage was done. Preston's presentation had been too polished, too comprehensive, too damning. We looked exactly like what he'd painted us to be, a broken family struggling in poverty while father offered stability and abundance. Your Honor, Miss, Hendricks continued, her voice strained, the children have explicitly stated they want to remain with their mother. Surely their wishes must be considered. Children don't always know what's best for them. Vaughn interjected smoothly. They might prefer ice cream for dinner and no bedtime, but responsible adults make difficult decisions for their welfare. Judge Morrison nodded slightly, and my heart sank further. She was buying every word. She began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of finality. Based on the substantial evidence presented regarding the decline in the children's living conditions, academic performance, and emotional well-being, I'm inclined to grant Mr. Winters' petition for full custody with supervised visitation for Miss Winters pending improvement in her circumstances. The words hit me like physical blows. Supervised visitation. They were going to take my babies and make me a visitor in their lives. I felt Finn pressing against my side, his small body trembling. My mother's gasp echoed from the back row. Your Honor, may I say something? The small voice cut through the courtroom with surprising clarity. Everyone turned to see Ivy standing in the back row, her purple backpack clutched in her hands. She looked impossibly small but absolutely determined, like a tiny soldier about to enter battle. Judge Morrison frowned. Young lady, please sit down. This is a legal proceeding, not a time for children to speak. But I have evidence that my dad is lying, Ivy said, her voice steady despite her pale face. He made me and Finn lie too, and I have proof. Preston shot to his feet, his carefully maintained composure cracking. She's been coached. This is obviously her mother's doing. Your Honor, this is highly inappropriate. Vaughn was already moving. Your Honor, the child is clearly under pressure. This kind of manipulation is exactly why we're seeking to remove them from Miss Winters' influence. But Ivy didn't back down. She took a step forward, unzipping her purple backpack. Dad made me delete videos from Mom's phone when she wasn't looking. He said if I helped him, I'd get a pool and a pony at his house. But I saved everything first because Mrs. Coleman, my teacher, she taught us about keeping records when someone asks you to do something wrong. The courtroom erupted. Preston's face had gone from red to white. Vaughn was objecting loudly about procedural violations. Miss Hendricks had stood up, sensing the tide might be turning. My mother was moving forward protectively toward Ivy. Order! Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Everyone sit down except the child. She looked at Ivy with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Young lady, what exactly are you saying? Ivy pulled out a small digital recorder from her backpack, holding it up like a shield. My dad taught me and Finn to lie about Mom. He practiced with us, told us exactly what to say. He said if we didn't help him, we'd never see Mom again. He said she was sick and needed to be taught a lesson for leaving him. This is ridiculous, Preston shouted. Your Honor, my ex-wife has clearly manipulated our daughter into this performance. This is exactly the kind of emotional abuse I've been trying to protect them from. But Judge Morrison held up her hand for silence, her eyes fixed on Ivy. How long have you been recording your father? Since the day Mom told us about the divorce, Ivy replied. I heard Dad on the phone telling someone called Bradley that he'd destroy Mom for embarrassing him. He said he'd make sure she never saw us again. That scared me, so I started recording everything on this recorder my friend gave me. I have 3 months of recordings. She pulled out a flash drive from her backpack. I also saved all the texts Dad deleted from Mom's phone, the photos he made disappear, and the emails he sent planning all of this with Mr. Vaughn. Vaughn's face had gone pale. Your Honor, this is completely inadmissible. A child cannot legally record adults without consent. This evidence is worthless. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Mr. Vaughn, are you suggesting that if this child has recordings of witness tampering and custodial interference, I should ignore them? The silence that followed was deafening. Preston sat frozen, his perfect plan unraveling thread by thread. Ivy stood there, all 4 feet of her, having just detonated a truth bomb in his carefully constructed lie. Play the recording, Judge Morrison commanded. Ivy walked forward with the steady determination of someone much older than 8 years. She placed the small digital recorder on the judge's bench, her hand trembling slightly as she pressed play. Preston's voice filled the courtroom, crystal clear and undeniable. Ivy, sweetie, when the social worker comes tomorrow, you need to tell her Mommy doesn't feed you properly. Can you do that for Daddy? Ivy's recorded voice responded, smaller, uncertain. But that's not true. Mom makes us breakfast every day. She even makes smiley faces with the pancakes. It's just pretend, princess, like a game we're playing. Remember, if we win this game, you'll get your own horse at Daddy's house, and that art studio I promised, all yours. But you have to help Daddy first. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her fingers frozen above the keys. The recording continued. Now, let's practice again. What do you say when they ask about dinner? Sometimes we only have cereal, Ivy's voice repeated mechanically. Good girl. And what about your clothes? Mom buys them from thrift stores and they smell funny. Perfect. You're such a smart girl, Ivy. So much smarter than your mother. Judge Morrison's expression had transformed from skepticism to shock. Preston stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is taken out of context. I was trying to prepare them for questions, not coaching them to lie. Sit down, Mr. Winters, Judge Morrison commanded, her voice sharp as broken glass. Ivy pressed another button, and a new recording began. This time it was Finn's voice, crying, I don't want to say mean things about Mom. Preston's voice turned cold, menacing. If you don't help Daddy, the judge will send Mommy to jail for being a bad parent. You'll never see her again. Is that what you want? For Mommy to go to jail because you wouldn't help? No! Finn's sobbing intensified. Then you'll tell them exactly what I taught you. About the crying, about the empty refrigerator, about feeling scared. And if you tell anyone about our practice sessions, especially your mother or that stupid therapist, Mommy goes straight to jail. Understood? My hands covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. Beside me, Miss Hendricks was furiously taking notes. In the back row, my mother held Finn, who had started crying at the sound of his own distress. There's more, Your Honor, Ivy said quietly. She clicked to another recording, dated just 2 days ago. Preston's voice again, talking to someone on speakerphone. Vaughn, the kid's been acting strange. I think she knows something. Vaughn's voice responded, It doesn't matter what she knows. She's 8. No court will take her seriously over 2 adults. Maintain the narrative. After tomorrow, you'll have full custody and can deal with any attitude problems then. And if she tries to say something, children are easily confused. We'll say she's been manipulated by her mother. Judge Morrison has no patience for parental alienation. Trust me, Preston, by tomorrow afternoon, your ex-wife will be lucky to see those kids once a month under supervision. The recording clicked off. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Your Honor? Ivy's voice was stronger now. I also have photos Dad made me delete from Mom's phone. She pulled out the flash drive. Pictures of bruises on Mom's arms from when Dad grabbed her. Texts where he threatened to kill himself if she left him. Emails where he promised to destroy her life if she divorced him. I saved everything before he made me delete it. She turned to look at Preston, and for the first time I saw my daughter's full strength. I knew you would try to hurt Mom. You always hurt Mom. But you taught me something important, Dad. You taught me that the person who controls the information controls the story, so I made sure I had all the information, Preston exploded. You lying little brat. After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me? He started moving toward Ivy, but 2 court officers immediately stepped forward, blocking his path. Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Mr. Winters, you will control yourself or be held in contempt. Your Honor, Miss Hendricks stood, her voice now confident and clear. We move for immediate dismissal of Mr. Winters' custody petition and request an emergency protective order. We also request that this evidence be forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of witness tampering, child coercion, and destruction of evidence. Vaughn tried one last time. Your Honor, this evidence was obtained illegally by a minor. It cannot be admissible. Judge Morrison looked at him with undisguised contempt. Mr. Vaughn, are you familiar with mandatory reporting laws? because what I've just heard constitutes child abuse, coercion, and multiple crimes. Not only is this evidence admissible, but I'm legally required to report it to Child Protective Services and law enforcement immediately." She turned to Ivy, her expression softening. "Young lady, you are one of the bravest people I've ever seen in my courtroom. Please return to your grandmother now." As Ivy walked back, she passed Preston's table. He reached out toward her, but she stepped away, her small voice carrying clearly, "You taught me to be strong, Dad. Just not the way you meant to." The custody decision came down like a hammer on Preston's glass house, shattering everything he'd built. Judge Morrison granted me full custody immediately, with Preston receiving supervised visits only, pending psychological evaluation and mandatory speed parenting classes. The criminal investigation began that same afternoon. The district attorney's office took Ivy's flash drive and recorder as evidence, praising her courage in documenting months of manipulation and abuse. But the real moment that stays with me, the one that defined everything that came after, happened in the courthouse parking lot. Preston was being escorted to his Mercedes by his lawyer when Ivy called out to him. We all stopped, tension crackling in the October air. "Dad," she said simply, "I want you to know I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because you were hurting us, and you wouldn't stop." Preston turned, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. For once, he had no words. The man who always controlled every narrative stood speechless before his 8-year-old daughter. "I loved you, Dad. I still love who you used to be, before you became so angry. Maybe someday you can be that person again." She took my hand and squeezed it. "But until then, we need to be safe from who you are now." We walked away, leaving Preston standing there with his shattered reputation and his expensive lawyer who would drop him as a client within the week. The country club would quietly revoke his membership. His real estate partners would distance themselves. The careful image he'd maintained for years would crumble completely. But I didn't care about his downfall. I cared about my children's healing. 6 months later, our small apartment feels like a palace of peace. Yes, we still live in the same 2-bedroom space, but now it's by choice while I save for something bigger. My freelance business has tripled since I no longer spend energy surviving Preston's psychological warfare. The walls are still covered with Ivy's artwork, but now they include her certificate of commendation from the district attorney's office, framed and hanging proudly above our secondhand couch. Finn has transformed from an anxious, tearful boy into his natural state of joyful chaos. He builds elaborate Lego courthouses now, calling them safe places where truth wins. His teacher recently told me he stood up to a playground bully by saying, "My sister taught me that documentation beats intimidation." I had to explain why I was laugh-crying at a parent-teacher conference. Ivy started seeing a therapist who specializes in children who've witnessed domestic abuse. In their first session, the therapist asked her why she'd started recording her father. Ivy's answer was simple but profound. My teacher, Mrs. Coleman, did a unit on personal safety. She said if someone asks you to lie, asks you to keep secrets from safe adults, or makes you feel scared, that's not okay. She said to tell a trusted adult, but I knew Dad would lie about it. So I decided to let him tell on himself. That purple backpack sits in our closet now, retired from active duty. Sometimes I look at it and think about the weight my 8-year-old carried, not just of the recorder and flash drive, but of the knowledge that she was building a case against her own father. The strength that must have taken still takes my breath away. "Mom," Ivy asked me recently while we were making dinner together, "do you think other kids are going through what we went through?" "Unfortunately, yes," I told her honestly. "Then I want to help them," she said, stirring the pasta with determination. "Maybe I can teach them what Mrs. Coleman taught me. That documentation beats intimidation. That truth is stronger than lies, even when the lies come from someone powerful." My daughter, the youngest whistleblower I know, has started a journal club at school for kids dealing with divorce. With the counselor's supervision, she teaches them about healthy relationships, boundary setting, and yes, the importance of speaking up when something feels wrong. Preston still maintains his innocence, of course. He tells anyone who will listen that he was entrapped by his vindictive ex-wife who coached their daughter. But the recordings speak for themselves. The court of public opinion has already ruled, and the criminal court's ruling is expected soon. Last week, Ivy received a letter from another child going through a custody battle, thanking her for being brave enough to stand up in court. "You showed me that kids have voices too," the letter said. Ivy framed it next to her commendation. "Sometimes courage roars like a lion. Sometimes it whispers in the voice of an 8-year-old girl saying, 'Your Honor, should I play what Dad made me delete?' Both can change the world. Both can save a family. Both can topple towers built on lies and replace them with foundations of truth." Our story isn't unique, but our ending was. Because one little girl with a purple backpack decided that truth was worth saving, that evidence was worth preserving, and that her family was worth protecting. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear that truth can triumph over manipulation, please share this video, like it to help others find this message, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, survival, and the unexpected heroes who sometimes come in very small packages. Remember, documentation beats intimidation, and sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths.